Hello guys, welcome to Rose Onyekachi YouTube channel. Wow, it's been a very beautiful and awesome time we've been having with you guys. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your love. We so much appreciate you. Yeah, thank you. If today is your first time to be with us or to watch our video, please don't forget to subscribe and also leave your notification button on so that whenever we upload new video, you can be the first person to watch it. Thank you so much. And for all the old people in the building, thank you so much for your support. We really love you so much.
Get dressed up on a Sunday morning, get up, travel the distance, get into the house of the Lord, lift your hands up and say, Lord, how great are you? Add an inch of pride. So Satan is like, hey, he will nourish that part of you. He will nourish the part of you that says you don't need them. You got direct access to God. So the enemy is filling up your heart with pride. Can you smell it when the enemy is filling your heart with pride? Talk to me. Can you smell it when you don't have problems? When your life is steady for a long time and he starts nourishing the part of you that is already strong. Get dressed up on a Sunday morning, get up, travel the distance, get into the house of the Lord, lift your hands up and say, Lord, how great are you? Add an inch of pride. So Satan is like, hey, he will nourish that part of you. He will nourish the part of you that says you don't need them. You got direct access to God. So the enemy is filling up your heart with pride. Can you smell it when the enemy is filling your heart with pride? Talk to me. Can you smell it when you don't have problems? When your life is steady for a long time and he starts nourishing the part of you that is already strong.
Sometimes we think that our sin only shows how bad we are. Our sin, it shows how good God is. Yeah. Our sin shows how perfect He is. Our sin shows how holy our God is. Our sin shows how bright, how glorious. You know, Isaiah, when he walked into the presence of God, it says that he looked at himself and said, oh my God, I live among a people of unclean lips. Woe unto me, woe unto me. He started looking down on himself. Why? Because now he was seeing the holiness of God. Now he was seeing the glory of God. His sin got highlighted in the presence of God's glory. Now, sometimes, this is Paul's argument. Let me not get ahead of that. It says in verse 5, but some might say, our sinfulness, it serves a good purpose, for it helps people see how righteous God is. What? That's what Paul is trying to emphasize here. He says, our sinfulness helps people to see how righteous God is, because there is only one who is holy, there is only one who is worthy. So when we sin and when we falter, it helps people see the righteousness of God. So isn't it unfair then for God to punish us? So Paul is being the devil's advocate here, and he's saying, I'm speaking as a human being. I'm speaking merely as a human being. I'm speaking like everybody else. Now, if my sin highlights God's goodness, If my sin shows God's righteousness, if my unfaithfulness amplifies God's faithfulness, isn't it unfair if God would punish me? Isn't it unfair if God would send me to hell for living a life of sin? Because I was doing God's job by highlighting this. So Paul is speaking from a human perspective, and then he gives the answer. Verse 6, he says, of course not. If God were not entirely fair, how would he be qualified to judge the world? See, you should understand this. This God that we're talking about, he's not just the one that is, a kind, loving king. He is also the judge of the whole world. And Paul is establishing this thing that he is the one who is going to judge everybody, and he's going to judge everybody fairly. And he says, yes, it is true that my sin, my unfaithfulness, my brokenness, my challenges, it amplifies God's righteousness. It shows off God's faithfulness. It shows off how good God is. And yet, it is not true that God is not fair. Yet, it is not true that God is not just. He is a just judge. And that is how he is qualified to judge the entire world. He's the person who is going to stand, before whom we are going to stand, and we are going to give an account for everything. We can justify before a human being. But there's only one place where we cannot justify. There's only one place where we cannot defend ourselves. There's only one place where we cannot try to prove ourselves right, because it is not just our actions, but even our thoughts, motives, words, things that we've spoken in the darkness, in hiding. Everything is going to be brought to the light when we stand before Him. That time, everything will judge us. Even our words will come back to haunt us back then. And the Bible says He is a just judge. He's not unfair. He's not going to put a blame on somebody that doesn't deserve that blame. Verse 7, it says, but someone might still argue, how can God condemn me as a sinner if my dishonesty highlights His truthfulness and brings Him more glory? So you and I, who are speaking in a human perspective, you remember Paul said, I'm speaking merely as a human being. It's like, how can God condemn me as a sinner if my dishonesty, my sin, it is only highlighting His truthfulness? Verse 8. And some people even slander you, and when you speak a word, you will still be proved right. You will still be proved perfect. When I sin, when I fail, when I go crazy, when I live in sadness and darkness, your glory will still shine brighter. That's what David is trying to say. And Apostle Paul, he highlights that. And he says,